So I'm going to talk about mental health and art. I'm going to do it while doing some art because this is how I maintain my mental health. And if instead in my evening creativity session I sit there talking to a camera, I won't very well do a good job of managing my mental health. And I'm not really very good at doing one thing at a time. In fact, I'm very bad at it. So I always like to double up the things I do, and this is all part of the same process of maintaining my mental health via the creative process. I'm going to talk about that. First, I'll do a quick history as to why I'm here doing this, talking about this at all, and maybe that will give a little bit of context. Maybe it will help paint a picture and sort of point the way to where I'm going with this, and we'll see how we get on. So I was an artist of sorts when I was a kid. I liked to draw pictures. I was influenced by my friend Kirk, who used to draw pictures of really quite disturbing monsters and serial killers and you name it, anything that I thought were absolutely fascinating, and I just wanted to do the same as him. He was a fair bit older than me, and I sort of idolised him to a degree. And so I just sort of, what do I need? A pencil and a bit of paper, and I could just start drawing. And that's what I did. I guess I must have been about, 11, 12 maybe younger, maybe older, I don't really remember. And I just sort of did, right? I saw what I wanted to make. I was very into sort of fantastic films and comics and all sorts of stuff, all that usual sort of stuff for someone my age at that point. And I wanted to copy the artists that I saw around me, the comics. I wanted to replicate the film posters. I wanted to copy what Kirk was doing. And I just liked doing it. I found it, at the time I didn't know why I was doing it, but I just did it. It became a bit of a compulsion. And I sort of quickly, Kirk's an amazing artist, and he really is still. He does comics that no one ever sees. But, he's got his thing, he's got his style, and I quickly diverged from that. I was always interested in making things that looked like the things that I was looking at, and so I sort of branched quite aggressively into sort of realism, and then really started to try and up the ante as I got through into my late teens on, the quality and of what I was doing. And I think there was no real. For a while I thought I was going to be an artist, but then I thought I was going to be a film director. I thought I was going to be any number of things, and so I think I just sort of did it because it was something I did and I liked doing, and I had ideas and I wanted to make them, and that's what I did. And I think I very rarely thought about doing it for anything serious. I didn't really take it seriously as a thing. It was just something I did and I liked doing, and from time to time I'd show my stuff to people. Then I went to college for a bit and I was really into sort of media studies, film production at that point, and that's what I was going to do. And but I still kept on doing this stuff in the background, and then I sort of came out the other end of that course and a bit lost, and failing to sort of make any sense of what was going on in my life, and ended up doing an A-level, another year's worth of art at college. And I did very well there, and I think everyone was very impressed by my ability, because I just used to spend my whole time painting and drawing and whatever I could do, pastels, whatever. I found it all really interesting and exciting, and I think my enthusiasm just came through, and wasn't natural or talented or anything. I was really adept at it because I just did it so much. I was obsessive, and I think I kind of went from one thing to another after that. I bounced around, ended up having a very horrible time of it. You know, at that point, my late teens, very late teens, and I was completely lost. I didn't know what I was doing, was supposed to be doing, and then my dad got cancer, and he died like a year or so later, and I ended up, that was obviously really unpleasant, and that had a really profoundly unpleasant and long-lasting effect on me. And I ended up actually going overseas and working in like holiday resorts and stuff, and my art largely disappeared. I mean, it was a wonderful time for me because it really allowed me to come out of my shell and sort of learn how to, you know, I was always quite a recluse before then, and you know, I had friends and stuff, and we'd do stuff, and my sort of mid-teens were quite an exciting time, but they were very variable. At that point I was completely lost, and so I ended up working in hotels in like the Mediterranean, and that's my art died for a bit there. And when I came back for, you know, after a few years of doing that and pretty much burning myself out, I ended up somehow getting swept up in the dot-com boom, being one of the first 15 employees of Amazon in the UK, and that swept me up, and for a little while, you know, we were bouncing around having lots of fun in the dot-com boom, and I was still doing the art in the background, and for a while I was taking it really seriously, and that was great. And then I just sort of stopped. I think we were living in the Netherlands for a bit with Amazon, and then we stopped, and then we came back to England, to London, and I was working for a different company, and we couldn't afford to live in a place with much space because, you know, London, and I ended up living in a tiny little hovel with my then girlfriend, my now wife, and I didn't have room to make any art, and I think that's when I sort of stopped doing it, and that really was it. And in my mind, it sort of was. I knew I'd go back to it one day, probably. It would never really occur to me the role that it played in my life, and it was just another hobby, another thing that I did, and I had lots of hobbies and I had lots of interests, and you know, at that point I was, you know, I liked going out, drinking, being out with people, you know, just new experiences, travelling, you name it. And so the art really fell by the wayside. I think I sort of had fits and starts of it, and it stopped. And that was it. And then I had and still have a long, reasonably successful career in IT, particularly in data analysis, that type of thing, and I really quite enjoy it when it's going well, and I really quite hate it when it's not, but it's quite a good career for me, in many ways, but I kept on having really severe and profound and long-lasting mental health crises. I didn't really know what was happening at the time and why. I didn't, you know, you sort of attach meaning to, you know, episodes of depression, anxiety, panic, and like the things that are going on around you, and of course they're affecting it, but they're not really the cause, or at least they weren't for me. I looked around myself and I found that I had a good life. I had a wife, I had kids, I had a job that paid pretty well, you know, at any given point in time. You know, I was lucky. I always felt lucky. I might have come from quite a poor background, but you know, I felt really like there were so many people with, you know, that are worse off than me, and you know, among my sort of peers, I was doing very well, and so I couldn't ever work out why I would have these bouts of, you know, severe, you know, what I would recognise as depression, anxiety, panic, the whole shebang. And it happened once or twice, and you sort of think, well, this was happening, that was happening, and so this is why I was unhappy. And then it happened one time in about 2017, 2018, after I transitioned to a new job, to a company that was not at all conducive to my general well-being, and I had a really major episode, and I had to leave. And it was that point I was like, oh God, this can't keep happening. I mean, what the hell is going on? Something else is happening here. This can't just be normal. I couldn't see anyone else around me who was having this same problem. And so I sought help, and I finally got to see a psychiatrist who very, very quickly spotted ADHD. And there was some signs of this when I was a kid, but ADHD didn't really exist, certainly not in the UK. It wasn't understood like it is now, and they certainly weren't going to go about diagnosing kids with it. And so I sort of, it never really occurred to me, and this guy said it, and I was like, well, that's something for kids, right? Kids have ADHD, and it was like, well, yeah, so do adults, and it doesn't go away. It's a thing, right? It's a neurological type, and I was like, well, okay, well, that's cool. Why am I feeling so miserable? And he sort of sent me off. Says we can probably help, and sent me off with a sort of fact sheet, which I read and read like a personal biography for me, and it was a bit of a revelation. So that wasn't the last time that would have happened. A few years later, when I'd figured out and really understood what ADHD was, and had medication and therapy, which we'll come back to, I started hanging out with a lot more people in the neurodivergent community, and found that yes, there was a bunch of ADHD people who I could really relate to, but also a bunch of autistic people I really relate to, and I still was having trouble with certain elements of my life and my way my brain was behaving, and certain things that didn't add up. So the ADHD stuff did, but it felt like it wasn't enough to explain everything that was going on. So I went to my then psychiatrist and therapist and said to them, well, do you think I'm autistic? And bizarrely, hadn't occurred to them. But once we all thought about it, we were like, yep, that one seems to fit too. So I got an official diagnosis of that about 6 months later. So I now know I'm ADHD, which is the combination of the two. So where does the art come into this? I mean, as much as knowing and understanding what was going on was important. The person I am, it was very destabilizing to realise that I was not the person who I thought I was twice in a fairly short period of time, and it took me a while to sort of figure out why being autistic or ADHD would lead me to have mental health problems, and it's not because autistic people or ADHD people have a higher propensity, or it's nothing genetic or anything like that. It's simply because society puts a lot of pressure on us to behave and act in a certain way and to do certain things that are not conducive to the way our brains are wired, and so we have to work really hard just to keep up with everyone else and the standard things like social interactions, but also things like things like doing finances and paperwork, which is particularly hard for the ADHD brain. All sorts of things, and just making eye contact and understanding and tracking social interactions is a lot harder work. It's not that we can't do it; it's that we process it more slowly because it's harder, and over time that adds up. It all just builds up like a plaque, and every now and again we pop because we're just emotionally exhausted, and there's not much. There's only so much you can do about it. Everyone talks about you need to stop masking or whatever, because that's what it is. We mask. We pretend that we are normal. It's for everyone else's benefit, like a performing squirrel, and that's exhausting. And we need time to recover, and we need time to wind down. And so I was talking to. I realised this and worked through this with my therapist at the time. This was before I even knew I was autistic, and she was brilliant. And we sort of discussed. I had too many bloody hobbies, and I had to get rid of some because I think I was studying like maths at the time or something for a degree, and I don't know why I was doing that. It was silly, and we discussed the types of activities, like mindful activities, that would help me calm my frenetic ADHD, particularly after a day's work, especially if I'd been interacting with people, and what I could do to relax, and what activities I could either do already or could try that would help me chill and wind down. And I said, well, I used to paint, draw. I was all right actually. I haven't done it for years, but I'm sure it's like riding a bike, right? And she was like, that sounds perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for, right? So I said, look, well, I'll go off and give it a go. Came back to her a couple of weeks later and said, oh yeah, I did the art stuff, I've been doing loads of it. I really, really enjoyed it, and I sort of got my phone out. I was like, yeah, let me show you some. And I thought I was caught of like a visible cringe from her, like, oh God, what am I going to have to, pretend I have to like some really awful stickman or something, you know what I mean? And I showed her the work that I did, and she literally was gobsmacked, like absolutely speechless. Because it turns out I'm quite good at this, and I did it because I worked hard. I didn't really realise I was working hard at the time when I was a kid and a teenager. But I'd lock myself in the room for hours and then just drawing and painting. Makes sense to make a person good at a thing, and everyone I think that didn't know me from when I was younger was a bit astounded about how good I already was at this, and I think I was okay. I did some really good work at that point, but I've come on quite a journey since then. And so I just sort of ploughed into this, and not because I've been told to do it, because effectively my therapist, she all but prescribed it. Yeah, you need to go and do this because this is going to be better than the medication we can give you. But it was just compulsive. I think in the moment I started doing it again, I got this feeling I hadn't had for decades. That feeling of flow, the flow state, the feeling of absorption, and all the mad, horrible stuff that was constantly cycling around in my head that I could never seem to keep control of, shut up for an hour or two. Just went away. And the rejuvenative properties of that are staggering, right? I mean, I was using alcohol and all sorts, and my ADHD meds helped a bit. I'd done antidepressants, which had, basically no effect on me at all, because my problem was dopamine dysregulation rather than serotonin, which is what most of those meds are for. But just an hour or two of doing some art, it's not like, there's so many self-help things out there that tell you to do this, that and the other, and mindfulness and meditation and stuff, and I've done meditation. It's helped me quite a lot, but it's hard. It's really, really brutally hard, and it takes a lot of effort. And then I just started drawing and painting, and it was effortless. It was so utterly joyful. And then at the end of it, I had a thing, and I quite like making things. I quite like the process of taking things and making something else out of it, almost something for nothing. And I was in love with making art again, and I just kept doing it, and I had a decent job and income then, and so I could afford to buy the materials, and I sort of, probably upgraded myself a bit too aggressively, but it's all paid off because I use it all now, and yeah, okay, so my problems didn't stop there, but I had an outlet suddenly, a way, a means of calming and regulating myself when the anxiety and the panic got too much, and an escape and a respite from that, and it may not have saved me from the eventual breakdowns, but it probably helped me avoid quite a few, and it definitely allowed me to stave them off, and to also help me process. And so obviously my paintings, a lot of my sort of emotional states and anxieties and things that I'm annoyed about or whatever, they come out in my paintings, and sometimes that's more conscious than others, but it really isn't about the final piece for me. It's not about the final work. So I'm not making art for the sake of making art. I'm making art for the sake of my mental health, and I love that people like my paintings, but it's not a prerequisite. I love that I can make a little bit of money out of this, and it is a little bit, but it's not necessary. If it became that made my process of making art stressful because I felt like I had to make money from it, then I would stop trying to make money from it, because it's more important to me that I have a tool for managing my mental health. And so, a few of the things I sort of learned along the way, when I started appreciating the effect that this was having on me and the beneficial and therapeutic effects, I started thinking about, well, what about it is so special to me? And what I realised, it was everything. And I think I've did a lot of reading on Zen, and I think that helped me, Zen Buddhism, that helped me sort of put this into some perspective. That I used to then fret about individual pieces and finishing things and making them look good, because I'd started showing them to people and people liked them, and I like the feeling of people liking my art. But then I started obsessing about getting things right and being perfectionist, and that was bad, right? And I needed really to stop that. And what really changed it was, like, firstly being able to do multiple things at once. I got a bit more space, and it allowed me to sort of not worry about finishing pieces and obsessing about it, and I could work on a few things at once, put things away, come back, and that allowed me to relax a bit. And then just the sort of general realization that it was the process, and I don't mean that sitting down with a paintbrush in front of an easel. I mean the whole process was what was good for me. It was everything about preparing the canvas. It was about the ideas and conceiving of things that I was going to do. It was looking for art equipment. It was cleaning my studio, cleaning my space, preparing for a new piece of art. Every part of it for me was the whole thing, and the individual artworks are just a bit at the end. The finished pieces are just the final stage of an entire process that's important to me. And once I got to that point, it became a lot easier to conceive of it in terms of things like I could, a commercial thing, a money making thing. Not, I don't make a lot of money, and it's still not the most important factor for me. But once I could start breaking up and see, well, it doesn't matter as long as I'm doing it, then I'm generally happy. And I do want to work on the things that I want to work on. But I can sort of chill, right? What matters is that I'm doing it. I'm going through the process. I'm given space to do it, and I'm given time to do it. I allow and effectively enforce the time to do it, and because I need it, and everyone in my life recognises that, and that when I'm in my studio, you leave me alone unless I invite you in, and that's absolutely sacrosanct to me, and not because I'm a selfish dude in his man cave. I need to do this because otherwise I become very, very ill. And when I become ill, everyone around me suffers, and I know there's people who love and care about me and don't want to see me suffering. And therefore you need to give me this break, and this is recuperation time. I spend my days on a computer writing lines of code on calls with people, talking to people, and I have to be quite human orientated, and it's exhausting. And if I don't get this break, if I don't get my respite, then it won't happen immediately, but over the space of days and weeks I become very, very ill, and I mean seriously ill, to the point of ceasing to function, and my quality of life becomes so immeasurably low I can't see the point in going on. And that's not something I think anyone wants for me, and I can't see why anyone would wish that on me. And art is not the only thing that helps. I need to exercise. I like running. I love being in the garden and in nature, and I think those processes as well are really important to me. But they all seem to ladder back up to this, because I'm out for a run and I come up with an idea. Right, I'm in my garden. I'm taking pictures of flowers and looking at the colours, and the colours are really stimulating me and helping me think about, new interesting ways to use colour, and all of this stuff, and it becomes all a part of every part of my life, to the point where, I'm trying to start a business, a consultancy business on the other side. I won't bore you with it, but we analyse data, and we've got to sell that. We've got to find clients, and it's really hard and really stressful. But all the things I'm learning about being an artist, all the processes, and even some of the things I'm producing, it's all spilling into that world, and how I conduct myself, how I do things, how I work, how I interact with people. All the stuff I learned from being an artist is just being a big part of that, and vice versa. And so it pervades every part of my life. And so, yeah, I mean, it is therapy for me, and I need to guard it. I need to make sure it's always therapy. But it's so much more, and it goes through every part of my life. So I don't think, I'm talking about things like painting for me and drawing. I'm sitting here cutting up a piece of paper. It's the same to me. I don't really mind, but I tend to prefer, having a brush in my hand. But I can also be happy in front of a computer making digital art. I use, code and programming to create art and to create stimulus, which is what this is for artistic pieces. But also, I like being creative. I like writing code creatively. I like, cooking and being creative in my cooking. And so when I'm sitting here, I am talking about me. I'm talking about painting. But I think any creative endeavour that you find mindful and relaxing and stimulating, interesting and exciting and joyous, that's what you should be doing.